Now, 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 now. Rock. Oh, really? That's chaos. Are you ready? A few minutes yet? We're coming in hard. We're talking to you, J-Boy.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Reality Check over here on Talkin Jets, your Thursday afternoon delight. Matt O'Leary along Jets Chaos. Jeremy, how are you this afternoon?
I'm good. It's an afternoon. It's raining here in Sacramento, but yeah, man, it's been a crazy ride. We seem to even take over Super Bowl Sundays in the headlines, don't we?
I was just going to say the offseason has started early for the New York Jets, and not just because they've been eliminated for a while, but on even the last day of the regular season in 2024, the day of the Super Bowl, everyone's gearing up for Chiefs, Eagles, and the Jets get in the headlines because it's released that the New York Jets will be moving on from Aaron Rodgers. There was a few days of speculation, but they made it official earlier today as they release a statement. We have informed Aaron Rodgers that we will be moving on in a different direction at quarterback. Let's start there, Jeremy. What was your initial reaction to that? Are you okay with this? Are the Jets making a historic mistake, setting their franchise back another 5 years? What is the feel for you after this decision?
Well, to me, we were set back 2 to 3 years, or 2 years at least minimum, somewhere between the Minnesota game and the end of the Pittsburgh Steelers game. Like somewhere in there. And to be honest, the feeling started creeping up in me when we were at that Denver game. Like when we were walking our way out of that game, I was already starting to get that creepy feeling. Like, I think this might be it. And I didn't want to be over dramatic because I sometimes I jump off a cliff. Oh, chaos! It's one game, but I started to have the feeling of this feels like 2011 when I watched them lose to Miami in a stinker in the rain in a very similar game, and that turned out to be a losing season after the 2 AFC Championship seasons, and I just had that sense. But somewhere in between Minnesota and Pittsburgh. Maybe even before that, but the Buffalo, the firing of Saleh Buffalo. I mean, somewhere in all of that, I went through the mourning, the acceptance, the grieving, the anger, the mourning, and all of that we were done for the next couple of years. Like I knew it was over, and I knew what was coming this year with the amount of open roster spots we were going to have, and like I just knew it. I said, "Here we are. We're going to have to, to rebuild again." And I don't know that it's going to be 5 years, but it's certainly looking like, this is going to be a very rough season ahead. And 26, the best we can hope for is just growth and improvement and maybe a wild card spot if we had everything go perfectly,
Yeah, I think what has surprised me the most is how off guard a lot of people were. Like how this came as a surprise to some people, and the reaction. And look, I get it. Like, can you make a legitimate case that in a vacuum in the year 2025, maybe Aaron Rodgers gives the Jets the best chance to win more games in comparison to Tyrod Taylor or that next crop of quarterbacks, right? Okay, you could sell me on that. But the visceral reaction is, I think, what really got me, because I don't know how much of a swing in the win-loss column having Aaron Rodgers, with whatever changes you make to the coaching staff, to the defense, to the rest of the offense, versus a different quarterback, let's say in that quarterback 25 to 35 range, right? Depending on who you get. And, I personally view Aaron Rodgers last year, he probably was like the 20th best quarterback in the league. Some weeks it was better than that. Other weeks it was worse, but even it out somewhere maybe around QB 20. I think I was more so surprised that was the reaction after the news. Because when I got the push notification, I kind of looked at it and just went, oh, okay. And was like, obviously I'll do a video on it, but it's like, whatever, that was their choice. Okay, we'll move on. I don't think I was expecting the kind of pushback that the Jets got from it.
Yeah, especially because we were 5-12 with Aaron Rodgers. I was forgetting. We played all 17 games and we were 5-12. And I think they're forgetting that there were games. Yeah, I don't care about his overall stat. First of all, the fluff stats, right? Touchdowns, interceptions, yards. That's all the fluff people will throw in your face. What they won't throw is game-winning drive opportunities in the fourth quarter. What was he, 0 for 5 or something? It was horrible. The interceptions, the timing of the interceptions. I mean, just the worst timed interceptions. He wasn't the same quarterback. Now, do I think that we had a better chance of winning this season with him? Yes. Am I foolish enough to say my job is to do everything I can to win as many games each season with no thought of the future beyond that, no thought of building for the future? No, because I'm smart enough to look at the Baltimore Ravens, the Green Bay Packers, the Pittsburgh Steelers, or any good, strong, solid organization, and know that every one of them made compromises and sacrifices in the short term. You had to balance, not throw out the season, but balance, not exactly do everything you can to win as many games as you can now. Yes, you want to win as many games as you can with some balance of understanding the salary cap, the future, what contracts are expiring, especially when there's no chance you're going to win the Super Bowl. 12 months ago, we did everything, and we all agreed. Do everything you can because we believed we had a roster that could win the Super Bowl. Right now, we cannot win the Super Bowl. So do I want to sacrifice and destroy 26, 27, and 28 and do everything I can to win as many games as possible this year? Maybe we win 8 or 9 games. Maybe we make a wild card spot and then lose. And then the next 3 years are screwed and worry about it then. Well, that's not what Pittsburgh does. That's not what Baltimore does. That's not what Green Bay does. That's certainly not what Kansas City does. And you know what? I kind of want to win a Super Bowl in my lifetime.
Right. And I think that's a fair point to bring up with what kind of ceiling versus floor do you have with Rodgers versus any of these other options. And for me, I look at this next year as not, I think there's a misconception that the Jets are throwing away 2025 by making this decision. I personally don't view it that way because I think they could still be competitive with a quarterback in the Tyrod Taylor range, of just that skill set. It could be him, it could be Derek Carr, Kirk, whoever you want to toss in there, Russell Wilson, doesn't matter. Just for the argument, I think they could still be competitive. And that's my expectation. I want to see in year one, just tangible improvement. They were a 5-win team a year ago. If they get worse in year one, that's not good for Aaron Glenn and the new staff. But can you win a couple more games, a few more games than you did a year ago? Maybe hover around 500. And maybe you don't make the playoffs in year one, but you go, you know what? Tyrod started 12 games for us. And, you had another quarterback for 5 and they went 8 and 9 and were kind of relevant through November into December. And there were some things that we liked that they did here. And we're excited about the future and getting a quarterback in 2026. And you could see a path to them being a legit perennial competitive team from 2026 and beyond. That's kind of what I'm looking for in 2025. I'm not looking for get me the best draft pick, tank, throw away the season. That's not how I look at this in the least.
Yeah, I mean, look, no matter one of the reasons why I was so depressed in the middle of last season was I knew there was no winning answer for us. I knew that if we bring Aaron Rodgers back, part of me is happy because I know that's what's best for the next season, the 25 season, that Aaron Rodgers gives us the best chance to win. I get it, right? And so part of me knew that if we bring him back, that's the good part. The bad part was the understanding of the salary cap. And unless he was willing to completely restructure, which he may have, I don't know. But unless I right now I have to base it on not knowing. So I had to balance that and knew the bad part about him coming back was going to be 2026. Also starting over with the new quarterback, the threat of what he would be in the locker room. You know, is he going to stop the new regime from creating a new culture? I don't know. Right. Versus the other side of the coin. If we cut him or if we let him go, yes, that might be better for 26 and beyond, right? It might give Aaron Glenn the chance to completely create a new locker room, but at the same time, disappointment that who's going to be our quarterback? This sucks, right? So for me, that was why I was so depressed during the 24 season, because I knew there was no win-win answer. I knew no matter what the decision was, it sucks.
Yeah, good point. It's, you know, you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And I give Glenn, 𝐒𝐿𝐺, and the rest of the Jets brass who made this decision credit for making it. Is a hard decision. It's tough to go to Aaron Rodgers and say, you know what, I think it's best for all sides to move on here, because that does open up a hole on your roster. And you now likely are losing Davante Adams. So you have another hole at wide receiver. Yeah. But you have to make some, you know, they have to make some tangible changes. Unfortunately, when you're 41 years old and you have a 5-win season, like that might be a part of your reality. Like you might not be the starting quarterback for long after that. And I think it's okay.
Yeah. I mean, look, there was definitely a part of me that was allowing himself to believe that with a good coach and a real coaching staff and a restructured Aaron, that's what I dreamt, that they would, like, that Aaron Rodgers was going to come back and figure out a way to restructure his contract to make it not as less damaging moving forward. That Davante was going to, obviously we knew we weren't going to pay him $39 million. So restructure a contract that really worked for us, that we were going to be able to bring in and fill the void holes, and we were going to able to maybe make the playoffs. I mean, that was a dream. I wanted that scenario. But the reality is, Rodgers restructuring contract doesn't mean I'm giving away money, that I'm willing to just throw away $50 million and say you only have to pay me $20 million. And you know, like, that was never realistically said in my mind what was happening. And the reality is that dream wasn't probably, I'm assuming, wasn't there. Like, it's really hard for me to imagine that all those things were going to happen. Davante was willing to play real cheap, and that Rodgers was willing to just throw away $50 million and say, I'll play for 20, you know, in 26, I'll restructure so you only have to pay $22 million. I think that was the best he could do, technically, because of bonus and the things like that. That was a pipe dream, right? It would have been, and I would have been 100% for it if they were willing to do all that. And if I find out they were, I'd be kind of annoyed, because then why have a bridge quarterback like Tyrod Taylor and not Aaron Rodgers if he was willing to do all that? I just have to assume that you know, he wasn't going to just do that. And if he was, it was going to be on his terms, and that Aaron Glenn and, you know, had his terms, and that obviously those terms didn't combine and meet, and you know, it didn't happen.
Right. It didn't happen. They decided to move on. And now you're in a spot where you got to find the next answer, which is okay. But I want to get into some comments here. We'll go through your guys' comments, continue our reaction, talk about maybe some options for the New York Jets here. Speaking of options, Hennessy Heisman, he's hanging out with us. Toss his comment up on the screen. He says dart time. Do you see a world where the Jets draft Jackson Dart?
Hennessy does not want Dart. I think, okay, so here's the two situations. Disastrous would be drafting him at 7. Like, yes, one of the most disastrous things. And anybody saying that we should draft Dart at 7 does not watch his film or anything. It's they are doing the same thing we did with the whole Zach Wilson thing, which I was a victim of too. They're believing hype. They like the name Jackson Dart. He's cool. That people are saying he's like Josh Allen and he was inaccurate too, and all these things. But the reality is, it would be disastrous. And that doesn't mean that he can't be successful. Any quarterback, we know this from Tom Brady, any quarterback can end up being a superstar. But it would just, like, when you look at the chances of it happening and the obstacles and the likeliness of it, it would be disastrous to take him at 7. That's just ridiculous, because you got a guy who, if you watch his film, he has to learn how to throw a football. So, I mean, even if he is a great quarterback, he ain't playing next year, right? And taking Dart at 7 means we are automatically not taking a quarterback at 26. And that's the real disaster. Like, I could always survive a bad pick. It's part of football. No matter who we take at 7 could be a bust. Bad picks are part of football. But we learned from the Hackenberg situation, the worst thing that can happen to an organization is you take the wrong guy the wrong year, and then you miss out the next year. And that would be the disastrous part for me. You take Dart in round 2, again, I think it's the same effect. I think you're going to kill yourself in 26. You take Howard or any of these other quarterbacks in the 4th round, I'm not going to be up. I'm not going to care that much either way. I'm going to say, okay, they're throwing a dart, get the pun.
Nice.
And they're taking a shot. Like, you want to take a shot on Will Howard in the 4th round, go ahead, whatever. I don't know if it's the smartest thing to do, but you want to bring in a young quarterback, fine. But you cannot use picks, our 1st rounder or 2nd round pick on a quarterback, and you cannot replace the understanding that we must draft a quarterback in 2026.
I was going to say, it's a very big difference drafting Jackson Dart at 7 or drafting him at 92 in the 3rd round. Like, if there's a world where he's sitting there in the 3rd round and they take a swing on him, sure. Because again, that doesn't stop you from taking a quarterback in 2026 if you still have to, right? Like, who knows? Maybe he comes into training camp, lights it up. He ends up starting over Tyrod Taylor and has a great rookie season. You go, oh, okay. We found our guy in the 3rd round. Fine. But like you said, if you take him 7th overall, that's pretty much taking you out of the conversation for a 1st round pick the following year. And I don't think that's the spot the Jets should be in. J-Boy wants to know, how are you going to take it when the Jets trade up to 1 by trading number 7, a 1st round pick in 2026, and Breece Hall? I'll go first on this one. I won't take that very well. I don't think you would either.
Look, and I'll say it again. Nobody knows with quarterbacks for sure. Right. And anybody that says they do is full of crap, because even the NFL in itself, 50% of the top 5, quarterbacks who were picked in the top 5 in a draft, 50% of the time fail. Right. Fail. So we don't really know. Right. I personally am not convinced or not excited about Ward in the sense, like, I'm not thinking, oh my God, this is a can't miss prospect. This is the guy. This is the one. Right. And there's lots of reasons why. And I have concerns about him. But the reality is, if they do it, I'd be upset for those reasons. And because how are we going to build a team around them if we have to give up all this draft capital? Then we don't even have the tools to build around them. Right. So there's that as well. So I'm not going to sit there and say Ward will not be a good quarterback in the NFL. But I will say, trading up to 1 and giving up our draft capital and doing it and taking all that risk on him based on the evidence that I think is there, in my opinion, would be a very big mistake.
I agree. I'm with you on that. I would not want to do that. Now, if there's some weird world where he falls to pick number 7 and you're not trading up, maybe different conversation, right? But giving up all the assets to go up and get him is different.
Right. If they love him, it's not the pick I would make it, right? But I'm not. NFL scouts can't get it right. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know. I'm not going to pretend I'm smarter than the rest of the world. It might not be what I would do if I was GM, but if they pick Cam Ward at 7, I'm not going to sit there and say I'm not a Jet fan anymore and start throwing things. What I'm going to say is, God, I hope they're right. And you know what? If they're talent evaluators and this GM absolutely loves him, and they make the pick, then they're doing the right thing based on what their evaluation is telling them to do. And it's hard for me to argue that.
I think Dano has my favorite comment of the show already. I know we're not even halfway through, but it's going to be hard to beat this one. He says, Matt, do you ever get sunburn on the back of your neck after a long stream? #ginger problems. fantastic question.
This is am I in the middle of a ginger to ginger conversation right now? I'll stay out of it.
It may be that case, but I don't want to throw you under the bus. But with the bald head, I'm sure you have some sunburn issues as well on the top of the head going on.
Oh, you saw me after I got back from Mobile.
Yeah, exactly. But so fun sidebar, and then we'll get back on track here. So I wasn't a football player growing up, but I played baseball, and every year I would play fall baseball. When it wasn't high school baseball season, I would play on a travel team in the summer and in the fall. And there were many years where it would be into October and I was still getting sunburned out on the field. So yes, SPF 50 plus every single time you step outside from about, I don't know, soon, about March through November. I think you got to sunblock it up just about. Love it. That's so funny. All right, let's go to our guy here, Jason Edwards, big supporter. We appreciate you. He has a member super chat, says, I'm completely tired of new quarterbacks every 3 to 4 years. Why can't we have good things as Jet fans? And I think that really just puts an emphasis on how important it is for this regime to find their guy, right?
Well, yeah, and that's why, in my opinion, that's why my take on this and what I want is to wait until 26 to really take our shot. Because I believe that there's so much talent in and we say this in the past, and sometimes it blows up and it's a bomb and it's a dud, but it's looking like the 26th draft might arguably be, and it all depends on how it turns out, but could end up being the quarterback draft of the decade. Like it very easily could work out that way. But it also depends on who comes out, right? Because we don't know that Manning's going to come out. There are guys that aren't necessarily going to come out next year. But but there's a potential that if everybody does come out in the 26th draft, that it's going to be a very special one. And I would rather, you know what I mean, take my shot when you have that big crop of talent and all these great quarterbacks, because like Jason Edwards is saying, I'm tired of missing. I'm tired of rolling the dice. I'm tired. I want to have the best chance possible. And I think that, none of the quarterbacks this year compare to some of the quarterbacks that are going to come out next year.
I'm with you on that one. Brees Lightning wants to know, does Mason Graham fall to us in the draft? I think there's a chance he's there at number 7. That's a pick that would excite me. I know, and Green Bean feels this way, and you usually, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but you tell me if you feel otherwise. But this is a deep defensive line class, so I get the argument of people saying I'd rather wait on defensive line somewhere between the 2nd and 4th round. But I think Graham's a great player, and if that was the choice for the Jets at 7, I would understand it, and I think it would go a long way to overhauling this defensive line.
Yeah, look, only a fool would be upset about picking Mason Graham, right? And like as far as the player, like he looks like he's going to be a great player. If anyone's going to be the next Jones from Kansas City, coming out of this draft, it's him, right? I mean, and probably maybe one of the best to come out in the last few years, arguably. So yeah, it's crazy to be upset about it. The only slight disappointment I would have is that it is such a deep draft in defensive tackle. There are so many good ones that you can get in either round 2, 3, or 4 that it would feel like, oh man, we just used our 7 and we could have really filled. Now, on those guys, that deep draft, they're deep, they're good. They could all be good players. Do any of them have the ceiling of Graham? No, absolutely not. The only way I would be upset if we took Mason Graham is if McMillan was on the board. If T-Mac is on the board and we took Mason Graham, I would be pissed not because Mason Graham is not just as much a great player as T-Mac, but this isn't a deep draft in wide receiver. And it's very hard. It might be very difficult in just a roll of the dice to be able to get a good wide receiver that's ever going to be a starter, yet alone a WR2, later on in this draft. Whereas I believe we could fill the need for defensive tackle and have a perfectly good defensive tackle next to Quinnen, later in the draft. Whereas I think number 7 is really the only chance if you want a day one starting wide receiver with a ceiling of, maybe being as good as Garrett or just slightly below, but being an amazing duo with Garrett. So that would probably be why I would be upset about it. But I would never be upset about Mason Graham, the player, and having him be a Jet. Like, that would never be upsetting to me. There'd always be a part of me that's really excited about his potential.
Obviously, I'm not going to hold you to this, and it's subject to change what happens during free agency and the lead up to the draft. But would you say right now, Tet McMillan is your favorite option for the Jets at pick number 7 if they were to stay there?
I mean, assuming the common sense thing that Abdul Carter is gone.
Yeah.
Right. If Abdul Carter is gone, Hunter, I guess, would make sense, because with Hunter, you get the wide, you could be your wide receiver if you wanted. I mean, like, he might be obviously he's a cornerback, but he's a cornerback who could help the team offensively, because it looks like very much like he's going to have some role as an offensive player. So obviously Hunter, Abdul Carter, these are a couple of players that I definitely would not be upset about at all, if they were there. But realistically, they're not going to be there. Whereas Mason Graham or T-Mac, one of those two might be there. I don't think both of them are going to be there. So I don't think I'm going to have the dilemma of, oh my God, we took Mason Graham and left T-Mac on the board. Like, I don't believe there's room for both of them to still be there when we pick.
I agree with you. I think it's one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
If both are available, and assuming that Abdul Carter is not available, because I think he probably goes top 4, I would be good with either of those guys. If both are available, give me Tet McMillan over Mason Graham. But if McMillan's off the board, the Jets stay at 7. They pick Mason Graham. I'm happy with how it worked out.
Yeah, I mean, we have to live with that. The funny thing is, I can't imagine being upset and saying, darn, we took Mason Graham, probably someone who's going to be a Pro Bowl defensive tackle. And with Quinnen, for a few years, and hopefully Quinnen has a few good years left before he starts to age, but like, be able to simultaneously have the two of them together, which feels kind of nice when you look at the Eagles and look what their two defensive tackles just created for them. So, nothing wrong with that. So there's a formula that says you could have two really high-level defensive tackles and it do pretty well for your team. So yeah, there's no way I'd cry over it. At all.
I know it's, especially in the draft world and mock draft season, usually it's like, okay, this is my guy. I want the Jets to take this, or I want my team to take this guy. But this year, I really feel like there's so many different areas the Jets could go, and you can make the case for whether it's wide receiver, Mason Graham, Tyler Warren, a right tackle, like whatever. There's multiple avenues. The point I want to make, there's multiple avenues the Jets can go where I'm good with them being 7th. It's not like you're going into it and being like, you have to come away with this position at pick number 7.
Yeah, I could even see, because we might want the safety. Right. I mean, like if you look at Wilkes and the way he runs his defense, we might want the safety. And there's also, this is an incredibly strong draft in edge. And there's a couple of guys that really good at the edge position that you could take. And I know a lot of people don't want to do that because, like, we feel burned out with edge. I'm just observing what we might do. But what about Mason Graham's on the board? Somebody at 10 or 11, some team trades up with us, because you're not trading a giant haul. You're moving up a couple of spots, and then gets us a 2nd or 3rd round pick, or hopefully it would be a 2nd round pick, right? And then that's an arguably okay thing, because maybe then we take the safety, and then, out of Georgia, and then all of a sudden, because in Wilkes' defense, it's hard for us to catch up to this, but we have to reverse our thinking. Wilkes' defense is the opposite of Saleh in the sense that he builds from the safety room backwards, right? So maybe he wants that stud safety. And if you can get us an extra 2nd round pick, then we can get who knows, a tackle and a offensive tackle and defensive tackle in the 2nd round, or whatever it is. So that's a scenario that could fall out as well.
Yeah, it's very different than the last regime. I'm glad you mentioned safety, because not only in the draft, in free agency as well. And I know you're like the biggest Justin Reed fan that I know, and I would be totally on board with the Jets bringing him in.
I've been saying, me and Tony, the GM, did a video 3 months ago in November that had us picking up Reed as a free agent, the safety from Kansas City.
Yeah, I would be, I would be totally in on that. I like Bynum a lot from the Vikings too at safety,
Sure.
but I would expect the Jets to sign one in free agency and spend a relatively early pick on the position as well. Maybe it's not 7, maybe it's not in the first round, but I wouldn't be surprised if, it was sign a safety and then the Notre Dame safety in the second round. What's his name? Watts, I think.
Xavier Watts would be the answer to what a lot of people potentially, right? These are all draft picks. We don't know that they're going to, if he hits, what's exciting about Watts is what we wanted. He creates turnovers.
Yeah. So I'm glad you brought up that position because I think that's one that we see a lot of focus on in the next few months at both free agency and the draft. Got another question from Dano here. What are the odds that this is the year where 0 quarterbacks go in the top 5? Because firstly, maybe some of the teams see 2026 crop and would rather wait. But secondly, maybe they don't have these guys graded as highly. What's your reaction to that?
It's definitely possible because I have to say that because I personally don't grade any of them as top 5 picks in this draft, right? So it'd be impossible for me to sit there and say that it would be so ridiculous to me to believe that NFL scouts, feel the way I do. Like, it would make me feel a little vindicated. Again, not saying that either Sanders or Ward's can't end up being good quarterbacks, but that doesn't mean you automatically value them as top 5 picks. I mean, because again, Dom C's chart would have, I think Sanders is his favorite. I think he'd have him as quarterback 7 last year. So none of these guys really warrant a top 5 pick, depending on some of our boards. So I don't think it's impossible because everything we all do is speculation. We don't know what's going on in those GM rooms, right? But what would shock me about that, Dano, this is how I would address what would shock me, is that none of the teams have them high on their board, that none of those teams are willing to reach, or that none of those teams trade with somebody who trades up. Like for none of that to happen, for all of the teams to say we'll pass, and then not for any of them to trade down to a team who would trade up for a quarterback, that is very low odds to me. That's very low odds.
I was just going to go that angle on it as well. While I don't think it's like out there or like a hot take necessarily to say that maybe in a different draft, these guys wouldn't be top 5 picks. I think because of the position that they play and the need for like how many quarterback needy teams there are, someone will like them. And whether maybe it's not Tennessee at 1 and they trade out, but the Giants have seemed enamored by this quarterback class in both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think the Raiders, they pick 6, so I guess technically that's out of the top 5. I'd be surprised if either of the 2 big name quarterbacks make it to where the Jets are at 7. I see the floor being the Raiders pick at 6 or someone else moving up in front of them to get one of these guys.
Yeah, I would think that the Raiders want Sanders. I honestly think that it would be Ward that can't slip. Like Sanders, I could see slipping other than the fact that I don't see the Raiders passing on him, but I could be wrong. But I think Ward is the guy I can't imagine slipping, like especially after the Eagles just won the Super Bowl. And you look at Jalen Hurts, a lot of people, I'm not into player comp so much, but a lot of people are looking at what Jalen Hurts is doing, and they look at Ward and they see a quarterback who's incredibly mobile, throws good vertical passes. Like that definitely has film of him, not just being a running quarterback, but making some nice touch passes. He has some skills that pop. So I definitely could see a team jumping all over Ward just on his athleticism and the fact that he's a double threat.
Yeah. The dual threat, I think, is what makes him enticing to teams for sure. We got Matthew Smith has a trade package. He really wants Cam Ward, and his trade package is 7, a 2026 first, a 2026 second, a 2027 first, and a 2027 second to get up for number 1 for Cam Ward. That I would have to look at what the previous trade ups for a number 1 pick have looked like in the past, but that feels like an overpay to get up that high.
I think that would probably go down most likely, unless he hit. If he hit, then whatever, it is what it is. But it would most likely go down as the worst trade in history. Like, it would be historically bad. That's a trade that would get a GM fired in 2 years. As soon as if he didn't work out, you're fired. Like, that would be an epically bad trade. When you look at the quarterbacks that are coming out in 26, so you're going to say over not waiting one more year, bridging a year, and then getting and having the opportunities to draft the quarterbacks that'll be available next year and roll the dice on Ward. Now, look, if he hit and he became a star quarterback, then nobody cares if you overpaid or reached. It's quarterback. If Glenn is a good coach and quarterback, you are so far, because now you could build a real Super Bowl team once you find that too, a great coach and a great quarterback. But there's nothing about Ward at all that makes me think he's like this generational quarterback that you give up your future to trade up and get.
Yeah, I was looking because I think really the only comp that I could think of is when the Rams traded up for Jared Goff in 2017. And they moved from 15 up to 1. So that's even further back than what 7 is. And they gave up their first round pick in 2016, which was that year of the draft, 2 second rounders from that year, a third round pick from that year, their first round pick the following year, and their third round pick the following year, and got the first overall pick, a 4th round pick, and a 6th round pick for that one. So, I think it would be less than the Rams package, and this looks like it's significantly more.
Well, the Rams got away with it for 2 things. It ended up getting them Stafford.
Yep.
For 1. And 2, sorry about that, I burped. The Rams did like a magical job in drafting in the later rounds. They did everything we bitch about not being able to do. Like, why can't we ever get a starting tackle in the 3rd or 4th round or the 5th round? Why can't we get a starting safety from a 4th or 5th round pick? Like, that's what the Rams do, right? And if we were able to do that, then these trades don't seem as bad but historically, we haven't exactly been great, or we haven't been at all able to build good rosters from 4th, 5th, 6th round picks.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good call out on that part with the history of not being able to land at those spots. We do have a super chat that I wanted to get to. Hang on, I was scrolling and I lost it. So give me a second here.
A light blue super chat. It's very pretty.
It does look nice, and we appreciate the support, City Bert. So he says, anyway, we can get Super Bowl champion Bryce Huff back for cheap. What do you think of Bryce Huff being inactive for the Super Bowl? I
don't think he's cheap, because I think that he still has guaranteed money for next year that's pretty expensive. I don't think we're in the best situation to afford that. If there was a way to do it where they pay most of it, we get him cheap, we got him inexpensively. I don't know, because I don't know if he succeeds under Wilkes. If we still had Salah's defense, exactly that exact defense, and he was cheap, I would do it. You know why? Because the Eagles misused him.
Yeah.
Like, they misused him. He wasn't lining up wide enough. Like, for us, he was wide 9. He was coming in, and his whole thing is he has the quick first step. He has the quick jump. He clearly needs space for that to happen. When you line him right up over the tackle, he doesn't get that jump. You're neutralizing his best strength. So I think that Huff, I wouldn't be surprised if he was up for trades. I wouldn't be surprised if you see him on the Niners.
I was just going to say that. I was going to say more likely to follow Salah than he is to come back to the Jets.
Yeah, because Salah would line him up wide 9 again. And that
I bet he'd be good too, by the way. I bet he'd have a bounce back year.
His number 1 asset was his jump. It was just get off on the ball when the ball was snapped. That was his asset. You line up over a tackle, you lose an advantage, because the tackle still can get you. You're still there physically, right? But if you're coming from wide, they have to be able to move outside to get you. And when you have a really good jump, that's harder to do. It was clear misuse of a player. They gambled that he was going to be as effective lining up over the tackle.
And he wasn't. For whatever reason, it didn't work in Vic Fangio's defense. And credit to the Eagles and Vic Fangio, they were deep enough at the position where they spent big money on a free agent. He didn't work, and it didn't matter, because that's how much depth that they had on that line. But I'm in agreement with you. I think he would be more likely to go and follow Robert Saleh to San Francisco.
Yeah, and Wild Wave is saying it. We're not running that defense anymore. We don't. I don't think we are, which is making me worry a little bit about Will McDonald.
Oh, good point. I haven't thought about that, but I'm curious to see the impact that it has on him. That's a good call out. Kashmir Black says, would you trade 2 first-round picks for Trevor Lawrence? Is apparently the Steelers checked in today on the availability of Trevor Lawrence.
That's a tougher question. The reason I wouldn't right now is because Trevor's not cheap. Yeah. So you're double paying. You're paying two number 1 picks and $50 million of salary cap. Like, to me, that's not the formula that works. The formula is drafting the Trevor Lawrence or drafting the really good quarterback, and getting the free years out of them. And then when you have to pay them, you didn't have to trade anybody to get them, right? So you get to keep your picks. To me, that's the way to do it. The way Buffalo did it, the way Kansas City did it. That's the way you have to do it. To give away tons of picks and still have to pay the $50 million per year, whatever it is, to me, that just doesn't work. Why don't I wait for a free agent to shake loose and just pay the $50 million?
Yeah, that's the tough part, right? Is because you have to give up not only the assets, but also make the payment too. And you lose out on the best value in sports, the quarterback on the rookie contract. He's entering 2025 would be his 5th-year option year. So he's relatively cheap for year 1 at a $17 million cap hit, but that jumps up year over year following that.
And if they were to trade him, which is a huge if, it would be a sign and trade. I'm sure that it would be some kind of sign and trade. Like the team that trades for him and gives away those number 1s needs a guarantee that he's going to be their quarterback for the next.
Yeah, well, he already has the contract extension, which kicks in the following year. He's got a 5-year contract that runs through 2030. And it's big money at the end. The cap hits the final couple of years are $78 million and $74 million. Now, usually these things get redone and restructured before you get to that point. The cap's going to go up astronomically as well in the next 5 years. Like, I know that number looks huge now, but in 5 years that may very well change.
I could be wrong, but I don't think 𝐒𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐞𝐞 took the job to trade Trevor. Like I could be wrong about that, but I don't think that this offensive-minded offensive coordinator candidate that a lot of people wanted went to Jacksonville, and the first thing he does is say, let me give away Trevor Lawrence and now have a quarterback issue.
Yeah, that I agree with you on. I'm with Hennessy on this comment here. I would trade 2 firsts for Burrow, though. I don't think Joe Burrow is available, but there's some rumblings that he's not exactly thrilled with how Cincinnati is spending their money. And spoiler, they're not. They're paying Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and they're like, we're not going to have money to afford the edge rusher Hendrickson or T. Higgins. And Burrow's looking around like, well, no one else is really getting paid money but us two, but we can't keep our guys together. So if for whatever ungodly reason Joe Burrow becomes available, I would do that in a second, because he is a confirmed top 5 quarterback in his prime right now.
Yeah, with Trevor Lawrence, it's all we believe with the right coaching. He's been screwed, and we believe he will be. Burrow's a whole different case because Burrow's been to a Super Bowl. We know what he's capable of. We know he's a top 5 quarterback. I think 2 firsts, you have to do that. Yeah, I think that even just saying it out loud, if I said that I wouldn't do that, I think that half this chat would hunt me down and kill me. I don't think you can turn down top 5 quarterback in his prime still with many years left for 2 firsts and a lot of money. I mean, there's your franchise. I mean, there's our guy for the next 7 to 10 years. I mean, or whatever it is. Like, that's what we've been dreaming of. It's just very hard to imagine the Bengals could be that stupid that they would ever part with. Like, it's so hard to get a franchise quarterback. Like, how do you part with it?
Yeah, it's tough. It'd be really tough if they decided, you know what, we're going to trade our franchise guy because he's not happy, instead of just making him happy.
Oh my God. The Cincinnati might blow up the stadium.
I don't know how they could recover from that as a franchise.
Yeah, I don't know how you would.
All right, let's keep rolling in the chat here. We got T-Law isn't leaving Jacksonville, especially under year one of Cohen. 0-17 incoming. Is this 0-17 for the Jets, or is this 0-17 for the Jacksonville Jaguars? What do we think?
Yeah, I don't see the Jaguars going 0-17. That's for sure. Not that
I also don't see the Jets either doing that.
Right. I don't think the Jacksonville. I'm not saying Jacksonville going to be world beaters, but I think they're going to win. I think they're going to win 4 to 5 games.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't see anybody. I don't predict anybody's winning 0 games. The last team I thought was going to win 0 games was the same as you, the Miami Dolphins, the first year under Flores, because that, like, to me, that was on paper the worst starting roster to start a season that I had ever seen.
Yeah, and everyone was killing them like, oh, this is bad for the sport. This is an obvious tanking situation. And then they ended up winning five games that year.
Right.
Not that 5 games is good, but when the bar is 0 and you win 5, that's a surprise.
And 9-7 the next year after that. Crazy.
Or the 2017 Jets. Everyone thought, oh, they're going to go 0-16 then, or 0-17, whatever it was. Man, they came close in 2020 to doing it, though.
But you figure out how hard it is. Like, it's actually really hard to go 0-17. I mean, how many teams that, like, what, Tampa Bay was like the one team that went a whole season without winning a game? Or did somebody end up doing it?
The 08 Lions.
The 08 Lions did it, right? So it's happened twice.
It's gotta really suck. You gotta really suck to do it. Oh, goodness gracious. Dakota follows it up by saying the Jets are going to be good. What do we define good as this year? Is good 9 wins, like a 9-8 season? Are we saying that was a good Jets season? Or are we talking like 11 wins? Because I don't think I could be sold on 11, but there might be a path to the Jets winning 8-9 games next year.
If we went 9-8, I'd be convinced that we have our Super Bowl coach, like our future. I said, this is our coach. This is our 15. We finally found our permanent coach. If we went 9-8, I could be wrong. That could backfire in my face. I know it, but that's how I'd feel. I would feel if you could turn this around that quickly, and with all the roster holes that we have to now fill and all the change that's going to come, if you tell me we were 9-8, I think we found our coach.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that. I think that would be a good sign for this team if they won 9 games in year 1 under Aaron Glenn. So spent a lot of time on going through in the chat and talking, moving on from Aaron Rodgers. But now that they have officially moved on from Aaron Rodgers, do you have a preference in the direction that they go at quarterback now?
Again, my number one thing, and I'll, root for anything that happens. I'm going to root for the best. But my number one thing is what I don't want to see happen is I don't want the 2026 drafting a quarterback in 26 to come off the table. Unless Joe Burrow came here for 2 number 1. I mean, if you give me some crazy, ridiculous scenario where we end up getting a quarterback that's a franchise quarterback. But I feel like somebody had said in the chat, I want a franchise quarterback that's here for years, a decade and more. And the best way I see that happening, the best possibility of that happening is to be patient and to find our guy in 26. So that's my number one thing that I want to see happen. Or it's not so much want to see what happens. I just want to know that whatever our solution is for this year, it leaves open the possibility of drafting a quarterback in 2026. Now, if we end up taking Sanders or Ward, again, I'm not going to be thrilled the moment it happens. I'm not thrilled about it now, the thought of it. But the second they actually did it, this is the kind of Jet fan I am. I'm looking for every reason why I should believe in them. And I'm going to say, Ward's going to be this. He's going to run all over the field, and he's going to throw down the sideline from, and I'm going to find a way to be positive about it because that's what fans do.
That is exactly what fans do. For me, I think a quarterback situation that I wouldn't mind is adding Jameis Winston to compete with Tyrod Taylor for the starting spot. Now, I'm not saying that Jameis is fantastic and he has his turnover issues, but have you seen any of the comparisons to Vinny Testaverde? Because it's a little scary how similar that they are actually.
Yeah, look, the only challenge I have with, and it's funny that because Winston had his good year, like his like little bit of a comeback to make people believe again under Sean Payton, who's from the Parcells tree, who was the guy who rescued Vinny Testaverde, and now you have Aaron Glenn, who comes from the Sean Payton Parcells tree. So if there's a coach to do it like that, like other than outside of Sean Payton, um, it would be interesting, but I mean, it's a long shot, but I mean, if you're gonna play around and take a shot like that and try to create a story like that, 2025, when there's no other real options and it's not looking like we have many choices, might not be the worst year to try that out and experiment with that. I mean, the kid shows outside the interceptions that he also has the ability to throw that rock all over the field.
Yeah. So, and there is overlap with Aaron Glenn during his time in New Orleans and Jameis's time in New Orleans too. So that's something to monitor for me. But making the comparison to Vinny Testaverde. Okay. So Vinny was drafted first overall by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in 1987. Jameis Winston drafted first overall by the Tampa Bay Bucs in 2015. In Vinny's second year in the league, his first as a full-time starter, he threw 35 interceptions to just 13 touchdowns. Jameis had a 30 interception season as well in his final year as a starter in Tampa Bay. Jameis is a few years younger than what Vinny was when he was brought in 98 by Bill Parcells, but kind of like that, bringing in that gunslinger mentality guy, former number 1 overall pick by Tampa Bay. There's a couple of weird connections there. I think it could work in again, a short term. Not saying that, you sign him and he's your quarterback the next 10 years, but can he come in and, I don't know, win some games and have an explosive offense, which might be exciting to watch? I think so.
Yeah. I mean, at least it's like there's this dream to it, right? That, what threw me off a little was he did some good things in Cleveland, but then it got really bad. So it got pretty bad. But then again, that's Cleveland, right? And things have never went really well for their quarterbacks. But things won't really go well for us either. I don't know, man. Look, the reason why I don't care, or I certainly won't be screaming and picketing, if they brought in Jameis Winston, the way I look at it is that doesn't harm or put into danger my dream of taking a quarterback in 2026.
No. City Bert's back with another super chat. Says, Jameis all the way. I'd rather lose 35-31 on a pick six than 15-12 on a missed field goal. He threw for 5,000 yards his last year as a starter. And look, again, I'm not saying this is your face of the franchise and he's going to be awesome, but I don't know, some combination of Tyrod Taylor and Jameis Winston, I think, could win you 8 games.
And Jameis Winston can certainly make Garrett Wilson happy because, outside the interceptions, like it's right here in front of us. City is right. Like the guy knows how to toss the rock. Like the guy whips the ball around. And like, if you're a receiver that gets open, you're going to be pretty happy with him. And Garrett Wilson, from what I can see, gets open. So I think that, I think that Garrett Wilson might end up being really happy in a situation like that. And it goes back to me saying, though, for any of these quarterbacks that we have, who's going to be our wide receiver too? I think that question still lingers.
It does. It definitely does still linger. And another thing on Jameis before we move on, he at least will push the ball down the field. The Jets offense last year was very east and west offense, a lot of 5-yard speed outs and dink and dunk your way down the field. Jameis will take some shots down the field and there'll be some big plays, which I personally would like to see.
There's no question it would be fun to watch. It wouldn't be boring. And if you watch Detroit's offense the last couple, which is what you could expect us to start shifting to, they're pretty fun to watch.
I would sign up for it. Dano's got another one. How heavily do you guys personally prioritize re-signing Jamie and Sherwood? You could start with this one.
I would like to, but not at the price that they're projecting for him. So I forget which site it is. Somebody's projecting 12 to 13 million. And I just think that while that doesn't sound like a lot, it isn't for a lot of teams, and depending on your situation. For us, even if we cut everybody that we couldn't clear and we have $70 million in cap space, what you got to remember is we have 20 open roster spots and multiple starting spots that are open. So we have to be so careful about where we put the money. And then the question comes, do you want to put $12 to $13 million in Sherwood? Because he doesn't have the biggest sample, right? I mean, it wasn't until last year until he started to play a significant amount of snaps. I really like Sherwood. I'd like to get him signed. But at 12, and even if it was at 12 million, I wouldn't be upset. But at the same time, signing him for that much money is not a priority to me, because I think that 12 million could go to something else that we need that's just as important. So it's not a super high priority to me. I think he's going to end up in Atlanta or San Francisco personally. But it's a bummer. It's a bummer. We developed him. We spent all the, but unfortunately the two guys that really developed him and the position coaches are all gone.
I looked up, PFF does their free agency rankings and they do contract projections. Their projection's a little bit different. And I think you'd be a little bit more comfortable with this number. They have it at 2 years with a $7.75 million AAV. If we're talking like $8 million a year, then I think that it's
of course. Yeah. 7 to 8 million. We jump all over it. Yeah. Absolutely. I don't know who said 12 to 13. It was but I heard it from a pretty valid source.
Yeah.
Someone said that was the estimate given. I don't know if it was an over the cap or what it was from or where it was from, but someone said that number. So that number scared me away. But 7 million to $15 million, 15 million 2-year contract for Sherwood. Absolutely. Let's do it right now. Like the day we're allowed to do it, we should have done it before the season ended.
Yeah. If this is what it would take, I think it's a no-brainer to bring him back.
Yeah.
Now, if he wants to follow 𝐒𝐵RIC or Saleh, I think it would be tough to retain him, honestly. But I would like to keep him, and especially if it's at this price range, that I would say yes. I would look to re-sign him, but he also he's going to have to want to stay in that scenario.
Absolutely.
So a good question, but I was curious to see what the price point was, and if he doesn't come back, I mean, now you got to add a linebacker to a need, because then it's just Quincy Williams, and then I don't think CJ Mosley's coming back.
Well, and even if he does, it's like what role is he going to have? No, it's definitely a position of need if he doesn't come back, and it does create another problem. So like that money would have to clearly go to a different position of need. So you could at least say we swap positions of need, right? But no, $7 to $8 million, like $15 million 2-year contract. It's not even of course you right now, get me the pen, let's draw up the contract for him. Like, of course I'll send the Taylor egg cheese and sandwich bacon. I'll send the freaking egg sandwich to him, if he does that.
So City Bert wants to know, what's the cap situation without Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers now? So they currently have, according to Over the Cap, $20.5 million in cap space. Now, if they were to cut Davante Adams, that adds essentially another $30 million to that cap space. So bump that up to 50, right? 50.5 million or 50.6 if you round up.
Right now, the Rodgers, though, post
June 1 is going to free up another 9.5 on top of that. So almost $60 million in free agency, in cap space, excuse me.
Right. And then when you get rid of Lazard, I think there's a couple other moves to get it to like in the 70s.
Yeah, Lazard would be 11 million in cap savings if you do it post June 1. Pre June 1 is another 6 million. There's other ways that you can go about saving this as well. So they can get it up to roughly 70 million.
Yeah, I keep seeing 70. Dom C found a way to get it to 77 or whatever. I don't know how he did that, but whatever. The point is we can get into the $70 million range.
Exactly. So that'll do it for us on this one. We've reached 4:00, another great episode in the book. So make sure to subscribe to the channel if you are new here. You can also check out Jeremy's work on his channel, my channel as well. We are back every Thursday. I'm Matt. He is Jeremy, and we will catch you next time.